Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for Point of View. I am Penna Dexter, and you could call it Liberty Institute Day here at Point of View. But I'm also going to call it Ronald Reagan's birthday. And the two kind of go together, because if you go to libertyinstitute.org and look at their front page, I think it's page 1 or page 2 of the website, you will find a wonderful article by one of the employees, Chris Corbett, there at Liberty Institute, about Ronald Reagan. And it has some things about Ronald Reagan that I had never known, especially his real commitment to religious liberty. So there are lots of quotes from him and statements, and we may talk about it a little bit more as the program goes on today. But I do highly recommend you go and read the article, print it out, or download it in some way, and take advantage of that. That's libertyinstitute.org, or you can click through from pointofview.net. Well, with me today, I've got a full table full of people from Liberty Institute, and I'm thrilled to have all of you. One of them is Jeff Mateer, and he's general counsel at Liberty Institute. And then Mike Berry, who's a frequent co-host on Fridays with us. He's Director of Military Affairs and Senior Counsel at Liberty Institute. And also we have Cassie Doolin, who has come to Liberty fairly recently and works in their communications department. And she's just come over with the guys. We may have you weigh in on a couple things later, but I'm so glad you're here, Cassie. And ladies and gentlemen, we're glad you are all here. It's really a good day to talk about liberty because of some of the victories that have taken place this week. And Jeff, I'm going to go to you first because you just got one that you checked out your messages, and there's one up in the state of New Jersey, and this is a perennial battle over the Pledge of Allegiance, isn't it?
Right, yeah. Well, happy Ronald Reagan Day.
Thank you.
It should be a national holiday, shouldn't it? Well, it's a good day for victories, a good day for religious freedom, a good day for people of faith. We were involved in a case in New Jersey defending the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'm sure the listeners are saying, well, haven't we heard this before? Yes, you have. And people keep attacking any reference of God in public life. It's going to be attacked.
Who went up against the pledge?
Well, it was the American Humanists are attacking the Pledge of Allegiance. This is the second lawsuit that they've brought in the last 2 years. They lost in Massachusetts. And as of just really a few hours ago, they've lost in New Jersey. And so in a case in which we were defending the Pledge of Allegiance on behalf of the American Legion and the school district there and some young people, the court has rejected it and thrown the case out, as it should have. So
do you think this will
victory.
Be the end of it there?
Well, they'll have the option to appeal. And up through the appellate court system. Let's hope not. Let's hope they get their message. But last time it took the Massachusetts Supreme Court to tell them that they didn't have a case. Perhaps they'll go through the New Jersey system and seek the appeal there. But let's hope not, because the Supreme Court made clear about 13 months ago in an opinion, it stated that one of the things that is permissible is saying under God in the Pledge of Allegiance, in the National Pledge of Allegiance. There shouldn't be any problem with a state pledge, like we have in Texas, like many states have, by referencing God. That's part of our American heritage.
Mike Berry is also here. And Mike, these battles, sometimes we know what the outcome will be. It's just a matter of coming in and standing up and fighting, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. At Liberty Institute, we have a talented team of attorneys, and we work with some of the best attorneys across the country, and we have wonderful clients. And really, all it takes in order for us to prevail in these cases is for Americans who value religious freedom and who value their constitutional rights to stand up and to say, I'm not willing to lay down these rights simply because somebody in the government or somebody from another organization tells me that I no longer have these rights. And we're seeing that, not just with respect to the Pledge of Allegiance, but really with respect to in every walk of life. I mean, churches and schools and the military, as long as people are willing to stand up and to say that these are my rights as written in the Constitution, as defined by our founding fathers, then we can win these cases.
It's exciting. People just need to, though, I think, be aware of the cases. They make good radio, and that's one reason why we love having you guys on Point of View, but they also help people understand where the battle lines are in the country. And there was another another Liberty case, Jeff, that I thought it was an interesting case as I watched it go along, because it was really about someone's right to congregate in their own home for worship. Yeah, and this wasn't even a Christian group, was it?
No, it's an incredible case that you think in America today in 2015, we still have people objecting to people meeting in their home to worship, to pray, to study. In this case, it wasn't a Christian group. It was a Jewish group, a group of Orthodox Jews who actually walk to their meeting place. And so they need a place in a neighborhood that they can walk to. And so really a small group of Orthodox Jews had a home here in North Dallas, and for some really absurd, unknown reason, a few of the neighbors, and it only takes a few, complained, and they went beyond complaining. They actually brought a lawsuit against them, and saying that they were violating a homeowners association restrictive covenant, and sued this Jewish synagogue, sued the rabbi, and brought them into court. And so you have this Jewish group really unwilling, but at the same time having to defend itself. And we were privileged at Liberty Institute to partner with a large international law firm and defend this group. And we went to court this week, and we won. And the judge here in Collin County, Texas, threw out the case and ruled in favor of the Jewish group, saying that, look, we have a First Amendment right, both provided under the Constitution, but also by federal law and by state law, for people to meet in their homes and engage in religious exercise. And that's a core bedrock fundamental principle. And fortunately, the judge here got it right. And it was a great day it's really a great day for religious liberty.
They're not all this easy, are they?
They're not. But again, it's this idea that somehow that any religion is somehow people are going to object to it, and the fact that people are freely engaged in their worship. And I'd like to say, it's limited, that this was just one, and this doesn't happen. But the truth is, this is happening across the country, where sometimes it's not neighbors, sometimes it's government authorities. We've cases in New York, cases in Mississippi, where governmental entities are trying to restrict the rights of people to gather together and to worship freely. And that's troubling. But just like Mike said, the good is when we do stand up, and you have people like this Jewish synagogue stand up, we do have precedent on our side, and we can and will win these cases.
So again, you can go to libertyinstitute.org. This is the Taurus Chaim case. And it's a victory for Liberty Institute and really for religious freedom. You can read about that in all the cases that we talk about. And plus you can read about Ronald Reagan. Some things that he stood for with regard to religious liberty are there at libertyinstitute.org, or just click through from pointofview.net. My two guests, co-hosts in studio today are Jeff Mateer and Mike Berry. And we're going to continue to talk about these cases a little bit later. We'll talk about what the president said at the National Prayer Breakfast yesterday, just in case you missed it. And also, we're going to I want to get Mike's opinion on Brian Williams, the NBC newsman's comments, since Mike spent a lot of time in the military. How does he feel about that? All of that and more right after this on Point of View.
The Point of View Commentary with Kirby Anderson.
The Supreme Court is ready to once again rule on same-sex marriage, and various cities are passing sexual orientation laws. Is there anything you and your church can do to protect itself from lawsuits and governmental action? Last week, I had Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel on my radio program. We spent part of the time talking about the constitutional and cultural issues surrounding the impending decision by the Supreme Court on same-sex marriage. Then I turned the conversation to what churches and Christian organizations can do. We should all be in prayer about the decision by the Supreme Court, but there are some changes churches might make to their bylaws and constitution that can protect them. His website has many wise suggestions about what can be written into the church bylaws. One safeguard is to have a written policy about church facilities. This should state that the church property and facilities cannot be used for any activity or speech that is contrary to the religious belief or practice of the church. Some churches might even limit the use of church facilities only to members of the church, but that might be more restrictive than a church might want to implement. In order for this addition to the bylaws to be effective, it would be wise to add something to the doctrinal statement about marriage. It should state that the church accepts the historic Christian position that marriage is the union of one man and one woman. It could also add that church believes that marriage and family are the foundations of society. You know, in the past, many churches have included a statement about sin and church discipline. A church member who engages in a sinful sexual practice, either heterosexual or homosexual, will face discipline from the leadership of the church. It would be wise to add some language about the church ministers and the church staff. State that they cannot be forced to use their position in any way that undermines the teaching of the church and the Bible. You know, I would encourage churches and church leaders to evaluate what they might add to their bylaws in order to protect them and their congregation. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter. The headline is Victory Congregation Taurus Chaim, free to continue worship in private home. And that just sounds like common sense, like sort of, well, duh. Of course, we live in America, but we had to fight for this, and Liberty Institute won this week. And Mike Berry, when you look at this, I mean, really, in America, we sort of take for granted that you get to have people into your home, even if it's on a regular basis, for worship, don't we?
Well, yeah, we take that for granted because that's something that human beings have done for centuries, if not millennia, right? Is simply to gather together in a private setting to worship. And, you know, in 2015, the only countries I'm aware of that don't allow that are China and North Korea. And so at Liberty Institute, we basically said we're not about to allow the United States to be added to that list.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm going to bring now into the conversation Cassie Doolin from Liberty. And Cassie, you, because you kind of operate in the communications section of Liberty, and so you get sort of the human interest factor, I think, sometimes to help us tell these stories. And the stories are so compelling. So you got to talk to the rabbi of this congregation, correct?
I did, and it was just amazing to sit down with him and hear a little bit about his story. He has 10 children, only a few who are still at home, but he loves his children, and he wants to help raise them up in the faith and help them to learn, and the other Jewish families in the community. And as Orthodox Jews, as they observe Sabbath and their religious holidays, they are required to meet somewhere within walking distance. So he said it's really, their location is at the heart of their community, and they have a beautiful community, but without a place to meet, he said their community would have disbanded. They literally, the families in the neighborhood would have had to move. They would have been disbanded, and had to move to a different location to find a place to meet together. And, while I was there was a rabbi there, and he was teaching an 11-year-old boy who's preparing for his bar mitzvah coming up in not too long. And just seeing the two of them sitting at a table studying the scriptures together, I realized that is what we were fighting for their right to meet and to worship and study and pray.
Yeah, and we have to remember, as we mentioned before, often it's just a few that are objecting that make it hard for the rest of us. And I did see when I was reading about this that there was an objection to someone pushing a baby carriage across the street, which made it inconvenient, I guess, for someone driving. I've been to that neighborhood. It's got wide streets. I mean, it's fine. I'm sure that there wasn't congestion or anything because of this. Also, the blind person walking to church or something. I mean, give me some more info on that.
Of course. Well, in the depositions, we talked to the people of the neighborhood and said, what exactly are you objecting to? And one of the men we have on record is saying, well, at one point there was a pregnant woman who was pushing a baby stroller across the street, and I had to stop and wait for her. And then at another point, there was a blind man who they have as a member of their congregation, and he was walking across the street, and I had to wait for him. My favorite, though, was a woman said that sometimes her dog barks when people cross the street to go to the congregation, and that wakes up her twins, who are 17 years old.
Okay. Well,
you couldn't make it up. You can't make it up, Penna.
Disposed of that one. So another case that I find very interesting, and it's the case, and Kelly's told us about this many times when we've been here, that was kind of began on Thanksgiving Day. And Mike, it took you away from your wonderful family because of this particular complaint about a chaplain in, I forget what branch of the military, you can tell me, but he had shared sort of his Christianity as a way to deal with thoughts of suicide and was called in on Thanksgiving about this. Tell us about it.
Well, yeah, of course, we're referring to the case of Army Chaplain Joe Lawhorn. And Chaplain Lawhorn was, as many chaplains in the Army are all chaplains are trained to do this, and many chaplains actually go on to do this, and that's to conduct suicide prevention training for their fellow soldiers and for their units. And Chaplain Lawhorn was doing this, and in accordance with Army regulations, Army policy, which all say that when you're conducting, I should probably back up for a second. The background is that suicide has really reached an epidemic proportions in the military, and specifically within the Army Ranger community. It's really a tragedy. And so the Army has, in essence, dictated that we shall leave no stone unturned in our attempt to help reduce the number of suicides as much as we possibly can, to the point where the United States Army has even said, we want you to address the spiritual aspects of suicide and depression, which is a precursor to suicide many times. And they said, talk about your faith, talk about whatever it takes to get soldiers to seek help, do it. And that's what Chaplain Lawhorn did. And he used his own personal testimony because in his experience, he's actually an Army Ranger himself. He earned the prestigious Army Ranger tab, which is pretty rare for chaplains. And he discussed his personal experiences with depression and that battle. And he spoke from the heart and gave his personal testimony, really in an attempt to get his fellow soldiers to see that, look, if this guy who is an Army Ranger, who is now a chaplain, if he was able to get help and he went to his faith to do so, then maybe I can do that too. And really, Chaplain Lawhorn just said, I don't care what you do, just get help. That's the bottom line.
It's a message of hope, really.
Right. And somebody in the audience complained. And in the military, we're trained, if you have a complaint or a beef with somebody, you address them one-on-one, or if they're in a position of higher authority than you, then you go to your immediate supervisor and you tell them, I have a problem with what so-and-so said, and it's called bringing it up the chain of command. You don't circumvent the chain of command, and the last thing you do, what they teach you in the military, is you never go run to the media and air your dirty laundry, so to speak. And that's exactly what this soldier did, is he ran to an atheist organization and a very, shall we say, progressive media publication and complained. And as a result of that complaint, the Chaplain Lawhorn's brigade commander punished him for it. And in the punishment, which is a written letter of concern, it said that you were perceived to advocate for Christianity and offer scripture solutions during your suicide prevention training. But tellingly, in that letter of concern, he couldn't point to any Army rule, law, or regulation that had been violated. He just said basically what you did was inappropriate because somebody complained about it, not because it broke the rules, not because...
But we're putting this information into your file, and that's not a good thing.
That's right. And people in the military with military experience will understand that all it takes is a phone call, or all it takes is somebody saying, hey, tell me a little bit about Chaplain Lawhorn. And they'll say, well, all I can tell you is that I issued him a letter of concern. And at that point, whether it's that chaplain might be up for promotion, or maybe he's seeking a prestigious assignment. And when somebody finds out that his previous brigade commander had issued a letter of concern and placed it in his file, that could be the end of that for that particular soldier. So this could have negative and adverse consequences on his career progression, on prestigious assignments, on awards, et cetera, et cetera.
So Liberty's strategy has partially been to get a certain member of Congress involved, correct?
Right. This event occurred. The incident occurred in Dahlonega, Georgia, which is way up in the northern part of Georgia, and the member of Congress who represents that constituency is Doug Collins, and Mr. Collins, by coincidence or otherwise, perhaps by providence, happens to be a reservist chaplain in the Air National Guard. So he took a particular interest in this incident because he himself, having served and having served as a military chaplain, understands the role of chaplains and the value that they bring to the military, and also understands the importance of religious freedom. So he got directly involved and has issued a letter to the United States Army asking them to, in essence, explain their actions and under what legal authority they were acting when this occurred.
So we're waiting to see what their response is to that then.
That's right. We anticipate a response in the next couple of days or weeks, and I'm very anxious to see what the Army has to say for itself and what legal authority they cite for the proposition that an Army officer can punish a chaplain for speaking about faith and spiritual matters during suicide prevention training.
Okay, folks, we'll keep you posted. And if you want to ask a question of any of these folks from Liberty Institute, give us a call at 800-351-1212. We'll open up the phones. I do want to mention that we have been talking all week about these 3 times in the United States Senate where there was an attempt to get a vote on, just a certain budgetary matter, the funding of the Department of Homeland Security. And there was no vote in the Senate. It was blocked. Democrats do not want to vote on that because the other side of that is a weakening of the executive order that's really unconstitutional. And perhaps we can talk a little bit to these folks about that regarding legalizing and bringing, into full working ability in the United States about 4 million illegals. And so that's been sort of our news peg, but we've also put up a good action item on our website regarding border security. The announcer will tell you more about it.
Leadership in the House of Representatives calls it a border security bill. Kenneth Palinkas, who represents Immigration Service personnel, calls it a global joke, writing that it, quote, does nothing to preclude anyone in the world from turning themselves in at the U.S. border and obtaining automatic entry and federal benefits. In other words, he's saying it's a welcome mat and free stuff. Does that sound like border security to you? Point of View developed its Take Action system for issues like this to help make your voice heard by your elected officials. Visit pointofview.net right now and click on the gray Take Action button near the top of the screen. That's the gray Take Action button. We've also got it linked in the middle of the front page under the pictures of today's guests. Kirby Anderson says border security is a serious issue that deserves real solutions. Take action now at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net. Thank you for taking action to speak up in defense of the nation. Pointofview.net. Take action. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
Well, I doubt you've missed the comments across the media and talk radio and the internet about the president's performance yesterday at the National Prayer Breakfast. And, you know, before we even begin talking about it, I found out in some of my reading about this that the actual theme of the prayer breakfast was remembering the Armenian genocide of 1915, which makes some of his comments and some of the things he didn't say even more interesting. And, you know, I guess the question we have to ask is faith a weapon? Because President Obama, in a sense, portrayed it that way. And let's just go to one clip from that talk at the National Prayer Breakfast.
The streets of Paris, we have seen violence and terror perpetrated by those who profess to stand up for faith, their faith. Profess to stand up for Islam, but in fact are betraying it.
Well, this was probably one of the truest statements that he made during the speech. And Jeff, as you think about this, I mean, we can talk about Islam and whether they're betraying Islam when they stand up and do some of these violent acts. But that was probably the strongest statement he made about Islam, and one of the few times he even used the word.
Yeah, it's really incredible. I mean, obviously, I respect the office of the presidency. However, to have this president use the National Prayer Breakfast to come out and really attack faith. I mean, when you really read the entire speech or listen to the entire speech, it's really an attack on faith, and that somehow faith is bad. Faith is what's wrong. Religion is what's wrong in this world. Religion, you know, caused the Crusades. Religion caused slavery. Religion caused, you know, the ISIS attacks of today, and that religion and faith is bad. And he talked about things about having, you know, it's good to have doubts. Well, you know, as a born-again believer, I have a hard time with that, because the Bible tells me that Jesus is the truth, the way, and life. And you know, it's okay as believers to have doubts, but that's not a good state. We want to have confidence. And to have the President of the United States use a very public forum to really express, whether directly but certainly indirectly, doubts that faith is the source of all bad. And I just don't believe that, and I think that's an improper forum for him. That was an improper place for him to express those views. And so I was really just taken aback when I heard the things that we've been hearing, and then actually went and read the speech, and it just, I do not understand it.
I don't understand it. It seems very disrespectful for me. Let's go to another clip.
The profound good, the strength, the tenacity, the compassion and love that can flow from all of our faiths, operating alongside those who seek to hijack religious for their own murderous ends. Humanity's been grappling with these questions throughout human history. And lest we get on our high horse and think this is unique to some other place, remember that during the Crusades and the Inquisition, people committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ.
Lest we get on our high horse and think it's unique to some other place, remember that during the Crusades and Inquisitions, people committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ. Well, the Crusades, first of all, I mean, we don't have to talk too much history here, but they were a response to Muslim violence against Christians, and they were like 1,000 years ago, and we have this. It just seems so disproportionate to bring that up when we have this horrendous enemy, which even just in recent days burned a pilot alive in a cage. And so, you know, to me, that was just extremely offensive. What are your thoughts, Mike?
Well, I was surprised, or perhaps not so surprised, that, you know, when he said that the acts of ISIS or ISIL betray the Islamic faith, that when he made the comparison to, you know, Christianity and the Crusades and slavery and Jim Crow, he did not make the same argument that those acts, even if purportedly done in the name of Christ, betray the Christian faith. So he whether he was implying that, but he didn't state it. He stated that. So in other words, he's saying, look, when the ISIS terrorists act in the name of Islam, they're actually not acting on behalf of Islam because they're betraying the Islamic faith. Oh, but Christians be warned, because don't get on your high horse. The Crusades were done in the name of Christ. Slavery and Jim Crow was done in the name of Christ. Okay, well, why not offer the explanatory note that, but we recognize that those were also betraying the teachings of Christ. But he didn't go that far, and so I was a little disappointed to hear that, or to not hear that.
It was disappointing, and it was because Christians actually reject the spreading of the faith by the sword. There's never been that part of our doctrine.
In fact, we teach that that's ineffective.
Yeah, and then we also were instrumental in getting slavery abolished in this country, and so we've just had the day that we celebrate Martin Luther King, who stood as a minister against all kinds of civil rights violations. So it was sad. He also said, no God condones terror. And I just think the lack of being able to articulate right and wrong, but putting the two religions, and I thought it was really a subtle way of equalizing Islam and Christianity. And it's so offensive in a country where there's a majority of Christians and where the Christian ethic rules still. No help from this administration. One more clip. This one, of course, he likes to call it ISIL, not ISIS. Let's go to the last one, Doug.
We see ISIL, a brutal, vicious death cult that, in the name of religion, carries out unspeakable acts of barbarism, terrorizing religious minorities like the Yazidis, subjecting women to rape as a weapon of war, and claiming the mantle of religious authority for such actions.
The Yazidis are in northern Iraq, and they did experience terrible persecution from ISIS. But he declined to mention the Christians who have been completely removed from the large city of Mosul, which was Nineveh. The statue memorial to Jonah was completely destroyed by them. Christians are fleeing Iraq. This is a land, a historical Christian land. And certainly in Syria, we're seeing ISIS persecuting Christians. It's really all over the Middle East. Christians are experiencing this horrendous violence from this group. And he didn't even mention that. At least he didn't. He may have been referring to it, but he didn't mention it. And I think, that's one of the biggest foreign policy issues that we should be tackling right now. And so for him to just gloss over that was, again, very offensive to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me it was when you read the whole speech, you listen to the whole speech, it's a hostility to religion. We do a document at Liberty called Undeniable, the Survey of Hostility to Religion in America, and I think we could put his speech in there next year. I mean, it shows it's a lack of really focus and understanding of the important role that religion plays. And I think is it ironic that he gave this speech a day before Ronald Reagan's birthday? You opened the show today talking about Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan understood. I mean, what's great about Reagan in contrast to this president? Ronald Reagan understood the important role of religion in life. And, I pulled up just really quick a great Reagan. Reagan said, freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. That wasn't in President Obama's speech yesterday. There wasn't a statement about the importance of the role of religion in life. Instead, he went after attacking it, and then he equates Christianity with Islam and the terrorist attacks in Islam. He equates with Christianity. And of course, he has to go back thousands of years to get his examples of people doing bad things in the name of Christ, when today people are doing bad things in the name of Muhammad. But don't let them stop there. Again, I think it's a lack of understanding the importance of religion to the American experience. Ronald Reagan understood that. He got it. He understood that religion, our first freedom, is the freedom of religion. And, we've been talking about our cases in the last segment. You think about it. I mean, people, that's the problem we run into in these cases. We run into when neighbors don't understand. It's good to have a group of Jewish folks in our neighborhood. Mm-hmm. It's good to have churches in our neighborhood. Religion can be good and is a positive influence.
If you want to make a comment on the speech, you can join us at 800-351-1212. And I do want to send you to libertyinstitute.org, or just click through from pointofview.net. Read the Reagan article there. You will find out things that he thought about religious liberty and said about it that you've never seen before. We'll be right back. The Associated Press reported recently on what it calls a growing trend: kids eating dinner at school. According to the AP, the Los Angeles Unified School District is doubling the number of students served dinner, with an eye toward eventually offering it at every school. School board member Bennett Kaiser told the AP, when kids are hungry, they don't pay attention. He says this is something that should have started years ago. The LA School District is the nation's second largest and contains lots of low-income neighborhoods where breakfasts and lunches have long been served at school. The introduction of after-school snacks and dinners is part of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act, passed and signed into law in 2010. Now, schools in the district serve supper to 75,000 students, and there are plans to expand the program to about 150,000 over the next 2 years. This is a national program. In 2014, nearly 1 million students in 13 states and the District of Columbia were served dinner or an after-school snack as part of a pilot program under this bill. That came to 104 million suppers served, up from 19 million in 2009. Schools where at least half the students are low income and qualify for free or reduced price lunch are reimbursed for each supper by the U.S. Department of Agriculture at a rate often significantly higher than the cost of the meal. LA School District derives $16.6 million in revenue from the program, which officials say will go toward expanding it. Even better-off families are asking to participate in this program. They say it will free up time after school for sports, homework, and family activities. Speaking of family activities, how about dinner together? The benefits of regular family dinners are obvious and backed by tons of research. They include greater academic achievement, less substance abuse, less delinquency, better family relations. Of course, that's assuming there is a family and that a parent is going to provide a meal. But this whole school dinner idea, the thought that you're a parent and the school will provide all your kids' meals, only encourages that kind of negligence and irresponsibility. According to the Heritage Foundation, this is taking things entirely in the wrong direction. Policy analyst Rachel Sheffield points out that the federal government currently operates about a dozen programs that provide food assistance to poor and lower-income Americans. On top of that, she says, there are about 70 other means-tested government welfare programs that provide cash, housing, medical care, and social services. 1 in 7 Americans receives food stamps. 1 in 5 children lives in a family receiving them. If a family is hungry, these should help. Really, as a nation, we must think about whether a welfare program provides more harm than good. And as for better-off families who wouldn't mind government-provided dinners at school, some real reprioritizing is in order. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back. I'm Penna Dexter in studio with Jeff Mateer and Mike Berry. And let's take your calls, 800-351-1212. The first one's from Bill in the state of Missouri, listening in on KNEO. Hi, Bill. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, Penna. Thanks for taking my call. This is going to sound really disrespectful, but I respect the office of the president. But the guy who's sitting there now, every time he opens his mouth, he proves out how stupid he actually is.
I don't know if it's stupid. I think he's got a method behind everything he does, but you may be right.
But the thing is, his comments about the Crusades and everything, I mean, how many photos of Christians being crucified have come out of Syria on the Internet?
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't mention them at all and what was being done to them. And I hate it when people bring up the Crusades, because it's got such a slant on it because of revisionist history.
Right.
It's ridiculous. And I'm just, I'm getting fed up with the whole thing. I mean, I wish there was some group asking for volunteers to go fight ISIS from the United States, because I'd sign up right away, and I'm 56 years old.
Wow, you're a great American. Well, Jeff and Mike, he did mention Saeed Abedini, who's in prison in Iran, and I heard that he actually recently met with his wife. She'd been asking for a meeting, and he was in her town, and they met, and so she was happy about that. But he has not publicly come out because I guess he certainly doesn't want to offend any Iranian authorities, to demand that he be released. And this is an American citizen in prison there. So that was another one I thought he could have made much more of during the speech.
Yeah, I mean, he, of course, had the Dalai Lama was there,
yeah.
And so there was a shout out to him. But you would have hoped that there would have been a strong statement, release Pastor Abedini now.
Yeah, I mean,
now,
really, I don't think that would derail any nuclear talks. Mike, any thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with everything that Bill says, with perhaps one exception is that I don't think that President Obama is stupid, because my observation of him over the past almost coming on 7 or 8 years now is that everything he does is very calculated. It's very measured. And in fact, he's a constitutional attorney, right? And so. And I think that's why, if you look at his comments that he made yesterday, it's that much more important to understand the context and framework from which he operates. He is a trained attorney. He has a legal mind, and he understands the importance of words that you choose to include in speeches, and also the importance of words that you don't choose to use. And that's why I highlighted the fact that some of his some comments that I wanted to hear him say were noticeably absent. And so the words that he chose. Obviously, we have those on record now, but also as equally important are the things that he failed to say, or in this case, chose not to say.
When we look at a government with this degree of hostility to religion, that makes the attacks on religious liberty that you guys fight all the time even more dangerous in a sense. I mean, there are times when you've had to partner with the government to defend, like, crosses and things like that, and sometimes you've been disappointed in the strength of their arguments or their involvement. But we're fighting governments from city governments and town governments all the way up to the federal government a lot of times for our religious liberty rights right now. So it's become a pitched battle. And there was one more case, and just lest people don't think that there's a threat, this case says it all, because there's another one. It has to do with I think a municipality up in the northeast.
Yeah. It comes out of New York, Auburn, New York, which is near Syracuse, and the target this time, and we don't always see this, but the target is First Presbyterian, so a traditional mainline congregation.
Probably not a PCA church.
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah. It's a mainline traditional church, been there for 200 years, serving the community. And they never thought that they would be a target of a hostile local government who didn't respect or recognize the importance of a church in their community. What's this church's offense? This church during the summer hosts a music camp, a glee camp, and they bring in kids from the community, and they minister and serve those kids. One would think that everyone would clap and applaud.
Yeah, you would.
Well, not the city of Auburn. The city of Auburn is using its zoning laws, saying that the church cannot engage in these activities. An incredible argument that the city wants to be able to say what is and is not religious exercise. The city attorney has deemed that having a music camp, serving kids in your community, is not religious exercise. It's not ministry. And therefore, it violates their zoning laws, and you can't do it on your church. And they've actually sued the church, brought them into municipal court, and is seeking to fine them for violating their ordinances.
Wow.
And so we were up there this week battling and had a hearing up there, and it looks like it's going to be continued a few months, and this battle will go on. But, again, it's this idea that, sometimes that religion is bad, and that's why I'm so troubled about the president's comments, because I think it feeds into that. that somehow we forgot what the founders understood, that you want to have a society in which religion is flourishing and that churches are strong and they add to communities. I mean, it is good for a church to have a camp on its campus in which kids come in and they teach them about music. That is good. And to think that the government wants to shut that down, it's outrageous.
Yeah, it's sort of the cleansing of the landscape, and it makes for not only a very drab landscape, but also a very amoral landscape and nation. And I know that that's part of the transformative agenda. Another part of it, of course, is something that we talked about all week, and it has to do with some of the actions that our president takes unilaterally because he cannot get them through Congress. And one of them has to do with this whole idea of bringing about 4 million people in. They're the parents of people that came here earlier. And, it's sort of this misguided compassion, I think, that is going to swell the ranks of the liberal side of things tremendously. And I think that's why this administration wants to get it through, whether it has to be through Congress or through the president. And so we've watched as Congress has tried to kind of dial back on some of this stuff this week, and there hasn't even been the ability to vote in the Senate. The Democrats have blocked it. And so that's been a real concern of ours, and it's just kind of, it's just part of this, hammer that's being wielded from above right now in this country. We're hoping that we'll be able to change some of that in the next elections. But meanwhile, we've got to do something about the immigration issue. And we've seen here at Point of View that a step-by-step, common sense type of plan is better, and certainly stopping the flow of illegal people coming into the country in various ways is the first place to start, and to get that effectively done before moving on and seeing what you can do about the people that are already here. So that's kind of where we're at in our Take Action item on our website, and we want you to read about it, look at it, and see if you can get on board with it. If you can, we make it very easy for you to weigh in with your member of Congress about the border. What do we do about the border? And just some really common sense ways of getting that part of the equation taken care of before moving on and having something else. So go to pointofview.net and check that out. And I'll let the announcer explain a little bit more about that to you during the break. I do want to mention that we've got several calls. People want to talk about the president's speech. We've got a fairly long break coming up, and we'll let you weigh in after that. We're also going to bring forward another issue that probably most of you have not missed, and that's the lie that was told by a trusted newscaster, Brian Williams. I want to touch on it, and you all can weigh in on it if you want to too, and certainly Mike and Jeff. But since it's in the news, we're going to cover it here on our weekend edition of Point of View. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Leadership in the House of Representatives calls it a border security bill. Kenneth Palinkas, who represents Immigration Service personnel, calls it a global joke, writing that it, quote, does nothing to preclude anyone in the world from turning themselves in at the U.S. border and obtaining automatic entry and federal benefits. In other words, he's saying it's a welcome mat and free stuff. Does that sound like border security to you? Point of View developed its Take Action system for issues like this to help make your voice heard by your elected officials. Visit pointofview.net right now and click on the gray Take Action button near the top of the screen. That's the gray Take Action button. We've also got it linked in the middle of the front page under the pictures of today's guests. Kirby Anderson says border security is a serious issue that deserves real solutions. Take action now at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net. Thank you for taking action to speak up in defense of the nation. Pointofview.net. Take action. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
This is what Ronald Reagan said, and I'd never even heard this before. By the way, happy Ronald Reagan Day. It's his 104th birthday. He said, "We establish no religion in this country, nor will we ever. We command no worship, we mandate no belief, but we poison our society when we remove its theological underpinnings. We court corruption when we leave it bereft of belief. All are free to believe or not to believe, or not believe. All are free to practice a faith or not, but those who believe must be free to speak of and act on their belief to apply moral teaching to public questions." Mike Berry and Jeff Mateer are here, and also Cassie Doolin, all from Liberty Institute. And that could be, Jeff, that could be Liberty's like motto.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, and there's so many. I mean, President Reagan spoke on religious freedom, religious liberty repeatedly, and it's a shame that we don't talk more about it because he understood it, he got it, he understood that a vibrant religious life was key, essential to not only protecting religious freedom, but protecting all freedoms.
You know, when this president, when our current president was running the first time, he did claim Christianity. And of course, there was a preacher that got a lot of play in the media who was his preacher. So it kind of made those of us who are really believers wonder about his faith. But we haven't heard much at all about him attending church or anything. Most presidents at least will attend church fairly regularly, and you know it's a politically good thing to do. He has no use for that, it doesn't seem like. So it's interesting also to see in this piece, and this is at libertyinstitute.org. They've put it up. One of their talented people there, that's a friend of mine, Chris Corbett. I just love his writing, and he put this together. And he also talked about Reagan's faith, which is so interesting. Some of the times he prayed, for instance, when he got shot, and he was, I mean, his lungs were filling up with blood. He was laying in the hospital, and he was praying for the guy that shot him. He said, "I focused on that tiled ceiling and prayed, but I realized I couldn't ask for God's help, while at the same time I felt hatred for the mixed-up young man who had shot me. I began to pray for his soul and that he would find his way back to the fold."
Wow.
That's Ronald Reagan. Amazing. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are taking your calls. A lot of you want to talk about this speech by President Obama yesterday, and we will take them. I want to bring in one more big item in the news. I don't know how long it will stay in the news, though. And, Mike, I want to get your thoughts on this because this is the most popular news anchor. I know Fox News is popular, but when you do a poll, the most popular anchor in the country is Brian Williams. He has a lot of trust placed in him. He's kind of got that gravitas. He's, of course, the anchor chair on NBC Nightly News, and the lie that he told was revealed this week. It's a 12-year-old lie, and it was been told many times about being shot on when he was over in Iraq in a helicopter, and he wasn't. And members of the military have called him out on it. And it's a little bit, I just think it's so insulting that he would have lied about it. It's almost like some people like sort of use the military to give themselves gravitas. And it feels like that's what he did with that. Either that or he just wanted a better story to make himself more interesting. But how does it make you feel as a person who served in the Marines that this guy would have gotten away with this so long, and now is giving such lame excuses for it.
Well, so here's the thing on the Brian Williams story that people need to understand is, and for those who have served or are serving, or have loved ones who are serving, they'll get this, is that service in the military is really just about duty and doing your duty, and that's why when people serve honorably, Liberty Institute, we so passionately defend our veterans memorials because we want to honor that service, and it's the service. It doesn't matter what the person did. It's the fact that they served honorably, and we want to honor that at Liberty Institute. And veterans understand that. And as somebody, myself, who is a veteran and is a combat veteran, there is a temptation to exaggerate what you did, because when you see the way that America celebrates its heroes, or at least that for most of my life we have, at least, and that's a different topic for a different day as to whether we continue to do so, but we celebrate heroes.
I think most Americans appreciate what members of the military do.
That's
really
right.
Do.
and I do too.
What's the number one movie in America today?
Yeah, it's American Sniper.
Right.
But at the same time, when somebody exaggerates or even lies about their service or having served, there is and you use the word trust, Penna, and there's a betrayal of that trust. And when somebody in the position that Brian Williams is in is speaking into the living room homes of millions of American families, there's a certain degree of trust. The reason they put the channel on NBC is because they trust Brian Williams. And when he begins to tell lies about his experience 12, 13 years ago, whatever it was, I think the reasonable conclusion and the reaction is, what else might he be exaggerating about? And I heard a comment this morning that if this had been somebody lower on the pecking order at NBC, or I can't remember who their parent company is, it might be Comcast, that person you wouldn't hear from them again. But, because it's Brian Williams, because he's so popular, he's probably going to get a free pass. And I'm not saying there's not room for grace and forgiveness here, but because there certainly is. But there is definitely a sense of betrayal when somebody is put in a position of trust, and then they distort it, and they tell a falsehood. And, to a certain degree, I wonder if Brian Williams told the story so many times he began to believe it himself and convinced himself that it was true. And we've seen this with others, and I hate to mention names, but Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. In Bosnia, the pictures. I mean, how do people think they're going to get away with this when there's cameras on them, and other media there? I mean, I'm surprised that Brian's story stood for this long. I think the sad thing about it, and the disrespect again for the military, or even sort of using it gratuitously, is his mea culpa, quote unquote, that he gave, saying that he was trying to honor someone in the military by saying these things. It was all over the map to me. It didn't make sense, and
that's a very unusual way of honoring somebody who served, because many will tell you that that's the exact opposite reaction. It was that they would feel dishonored by somebody who has not actually experienced that, to then claim that they have.
So we're taking your calls, ladies and gentlemen, 800-351-1212. And I do also want to talk about another sort of pretty exciting religious liberty victory. And it has to do with the InterVarsity ministry. We'll talk about that after the break. But we do want to hear from you folks about what do you think about the Brian Williams case. You can certainly comment on that. And also we have folks who want to comment on the president's speech at the National Prayer Breakfast. And if you have anything to say about Ronald Reagan, we'd love to hear that too. He was my governor and then my president, and I am so happy to be able to say that. Stay with us for more of Point of View. We'll be right back.
The Point of View Commentary with Kirby Anderson.
The Supreme Court is ready to once again rule on same-sex marriage, and various cities are passing sexual orientation laws. Is there anything you and your church can do to protect itself from lawsuits and governmental action? Last week, I had Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel on my radio program. We spent part of the time talking about the constitutional and cultural issues surrounding the impending decision by the Supreme Court on same-sex marriage. Then I turned the conversation to what churches and Christian organizations can do. We should all be in prayer about the decision by the Supreme Court, but there are some changes churches might make to their bylaws and constitution that can protect them. His website has many wise suggestions about what can be written into the church bylaws. One safeguard is to have a written policy about church facilities. This should state that the church property and facilities cannot be used for any activity or speech that is contrary to the religious belief or practice of the church. Some churches might even limit the use of church facilities only to members of the church, but that might be more restrictive than a church might want to implement. In order for this addition to the bylaws to be effective, it would be wise to add something to the doctrinal statement about marriage. It should state that the church accepts the historic Christian position that marriage is the union of one man and one woman. It could also add that church believes that marriage and family are the foundations of society. You know, in the past, many churches have included a statement about sin and church discipline. A church member who engages in a sinful sexual practice, either heterosexual or homosexual, will face discipline from the leadership of the church. It would be wise to add some language about the church ministers and the church staff. State that they cannot be forced to use their position in any way that undermines the teaching of the church and the Bible. You know, I would encourage churches and church leaders to evaluate what they might add to their bylaws in order to protect them and their congregation. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. We are taking your calls. We've got a bank full of them, and we will take them in a minute. I do want to point you to pointofview.net. We've put up a piece from USA Today. It's an editorial by a Mr. Reader, and he titles it Brian Williams' Unmitigated Disaster. And he sort of laments this whole thing, the fact that he was a respected newscaster, and just sort of how this all happened, and just kind of quotes some of the sorry excuses. And then at the end, and this is kind of the way I feel about it too, because you sort of like, especially if you have any experience at all in media, you sort of root for people to, I mean, at least I do. I look at people and I sort of critique them, and I really appreciate when they're good, and he is good. And and this person, Mr. Reader, has had been interviewed by Brian Williams, and so he liked him. But at the end, his final words are, "I kind of wish I could say it isn't so, Brian," but it is so, and Brian Williams and NBC have to deal with it. Well, Jeff Mateer from Liberty Institute, I want to ask you about one more religious liberty case that was basically decided this week. The decision was announced by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. It has to do with a ministry a lot of us know, InterVarsity, and it's a good ruling, isn't it?
Yeah, excellent ruling. And it again, it's what we tell people all the time. If we can find people to stand up, we do have great precedent in this country. We just need the people to stand up so that we can then rely on that great precedent. Well, the Sixth Circuit gave us some great precedent this week in a case involving InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. your viewer, the listeners may remember just a couple years ago, the Supreme Court handled a case called Hosanna Tabor, which dealt with, at its core, does the government have a right to be involved in the hiring and firing of our religious leaders, our ministers? And the Supreme Court, remarkably, in a unanimous 9-0 decision, said that the government does not have a right to interfere in the hiring and firing of ministers of religious organizations. Remarkable 9-0, even more remarkable.
That is remarkable.
It is, and even more remarkable that the Solicitor General of the United States, Obama's Solicitor General, argued that the government does have a right to be involved in the hiring and firing of our ministers. But fortunately, it is scary. But fortunately, the court rejected that. Well, since that case, the last couple of years, the issues have been, who does it apply to? Does it just have to be a church? And so, your church and your minister, does it only apply to them? Who else does it apply to? So does it only apply to churches, and does it only apply to the pastor, the minister up front? Now, we at Liberty Institute, as other religious freedom groups have been arguing, no, that's not the purpose. The First Amendment doesn't just apply to churches. It applies to people of faith and all religious organizations. Well, the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship case presents that issue to us. And so the first issue was, does it apply to this parachurch organization? And the Sixth Circuit got it right and said, absolutely. It's not, you don't have to be a church. You don't have to be the Catholic Church. You don't have to be.
So there was someone that was fired for a reason, a violation of the policies, the moral policies of InterVarsity. Exactly.
InterVarsity, like a lot of religious ministries, has a standard of conduct, and they terminated an employee, and she tried to bring a lawsuit. And what eventually the court said was she can't bring one because it's not the role of government to interfere with the hiring and firing decision of employees. And one of the arguments made was, well, InterVarsity, you're not a church. It shouldn't apply to you. Court rejected that. The other one was, well, I'm not a minister because the doctrine only applies to ministers. And the court said, no, this isn't about titles. You might not have the title minister. Her title happened to be spiritual director. You don't have to be ordained, but you just have to be a leader who has the function of ministering. And so for any church organization, any religious organization, any faith-based organization, this case confirms that you have protection in the hiring and firing of your leaders, those who minister. So any religious ministry out there, what we'd encourage them to do is first go to libertyinstitute.org and see about these cases and what you need to do. But one of the things you need to do is you need to look at your documents and make sure those documents are using the right type of language, and that any employee who's in a ministry capacity, you're making that very clear. And so it's a very important decision.
Do you at Liberty help people with that?
Yeah, we do that every day, ranging from seminaries to churches to Christian schools, other faith-based organizations. We're helping them walk through that process.
Okay, folks, another reason to go to libertyinstitute.org. And, if all of you are involved in churches and many of you are involved in ministries, and so this is something, there's so much coming against the church right now from so many fronts. It'd be good to be ready legally, and Liberty Institute can help you with that. Let's go to the phones. Let's see. Maxine is in Texas. Maxine, thanks for calling in.
Thank you for taking my call.
What's your comment today?
I just had a question about President Obama. Is he insane?
Oh.
Absolutely, totally Looney Tune insane.
No, I don't think so. But
the things he
why
says
do you think so?
Does, well, every day when I turn on the news or turn on my computer, my jaws drop to the floor. He does something every day that just makes my head want to explode. I cannot believe things are going on that are going on. I mean, it's inconceivable. He must be insane.
Well, I'm not surprised at what he does, because he said he was going to be a transformative president, and he has done that in spades. He's really actually met that campaign promise. I didn't think he'd be able to do as much as he's doing, but he has.
Destroying everything we believed in as Americans, I thought. You know, I'm old. I'm 65. I've been here a long time. I've seen a lot of stuff. But I've never in my life seen the horrible things. I mean, for the President of the United States to do and say the things he does are just...
Well, give me one example besides what you heard in the speech.
Well, they had the little gathering in France, and he couldn't go. How embarrassing was that? And what, he could go see that Saudi, the Saudi king, and bow to him, but he couldn't go to the one in France. And to bring up the Crusades in his prayer breakfast speech, what was that, 800 years ago? Like that guy got on TV about Benghazi. He said, "Oh, dude, that was 2 years ago." Well, dude, the Crusades were 800 years ago. We're gonna bring that up and compare it to ISIS.
Yeah, the Crusades are always brought up in such a disingenuous way, and this president certainly did that. Listen, Maxine, thank you. I think we all, there's just a sense of frustration there. But I'm so glad that my hope is not in the president. So grateful for that.
It's all of is we can't even have a normal life anymore. Every day we get up and wonder what kind of catastrophe we're facing now, or what kind of destruction is going on now. We can't even enjoy the things we do have for worrying about what he's going to do next.
Yeah. Well, I encourage you to still try to enjoy the things of life, the blessings that God has given you. It's a struggle sometimes, and I remember going through other times where you just saw things coming at you from on high, from the top levels of the federal government, and being very upset all the time. And I've decided now in my, maybe I've mellowed a little bit, that I'm going to thank the Lord for the blessings, and then with every fiber of my being, fight these things.
It's in God's hands anyway. Things are in such a mess now. I think God would be the only person that could straighten it out.
Well, he does have it in his hands, and none of this is any surprise to him. Although, Michael, sometimes I'd like to give him a few instructions, but I don't think, I think he knows what direction history's going.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, the old saying is that God created man in his image, and man, being the gentleman that he is, returned the favor.
We do try to do that. We do try to make God into our image. Let's go to another call. This is Bill in Missouri. Hi, Bill.
Hi, how's it going? Just want to make a comment about Brian Williams.
Were you the same Bill that called earlier?
Yeah.
Oh.
I want a job on radio. Anyway.
Okay, we're not supposed to let people through twice in one day, but go ahead since you're in, you're grandfathered in.
I think he's auditioning for co-host.
Well, anyway, what I want to say about the mainstream media, if Edward R. Murrow or Walter Cronkite were still around, I think they'd be doing some slapping.
Do you?
I really do, because they haven't been journalists for, the last 20 years? They're spin doctors, talking heads. That's all they are.
Yeah, I think, one thing that we learned from what the president says and other things is that truth doesn't mean what it used to mean. And so that's part of the reason I think Brian Williams will get away with this. We'll be right back.
Leadership in the House of Representatives calls it a border security bill. Kenneth Palinkas, who represents Immigration Service personnel, calls it a global joke, writing that it, quote, does nothing to preclude anyone in the world from turning themselves in at the U.S. border and obtaining automatic entry and federal benefits. In other words, he's saying it's a welcome mat and free stuff. Does that sound like border security to you? Point of View developed its Take Action system for issues like this to help make your voice heard by your elected officials. Visit pointofview.net right now and click on the gray Take Action button near the top of the screen. That's the gray Take Action button. We've also got it linked in the middle of the front page under the pictures of today's guests. Kirby Anderson says border security is a serious issue that deserves real solutions. Take action now at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net. Thank you for taking action to speak up in defense of the nation. Pointofview.net. Take action. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Penna Dexter.
Our last caller, or an earlier caller, was expressing sort of her frustration and how she lets some of the things that are taking place in the country right now upset her. They get to her. And certainly that's a real temptation for all of us as we watch some of this and we feel powerless to even change it. And so I wanted to bring in some people who, might kind of help us get a different perspective on that. So we're taking your calls here at 800-351-1212. Barbara is in South Carolina. I think she may be able to encourage us. Hi, Barbara.
Hello. I saw something online the other day, either from Liberty Counsel or AFA or ACLJ, and it said, pick out one of the top leaders in our country that is voting for the things that Christians know the Bible says is wrong. Pick out one and pray for them every day. And I picked out Obama, and I am praying for the Holy Spirit to fall on him and change his heart, because God put him in power. America does need discipline. And I am praying for him, and prayer is our most powerful weapon. And if we will do that, we will see a change.
All right. Let's let all the folks at Liberty weigh in on this. Praying for the president. Michael, what do you think?
Oh, you made me go first, I see.
Are you doing that on a daily basis?
Probably not on a daily basis, but absolutely I agree with Barbara that that's one of the, if not the most powerful thing we can do to influence our national leaders is to pray for them. And I'll be honest, early in my faith, I perhaps didn't put as much stock in the power of prayer as I do now. And it's really been through my maturation as a Christian and as a man of faith, and having seen the effectiveness of prayer and mainly other people praying for me and for those that I care about, and seeing just how powerful and effective it can be, that it really led me to believe, this prayer stuff really does work. And I remember an old saying, it's that miracles don't produce faith, but faith produces miracles.
Cassie, I know, worked for a ministry that sort of highlights the faith of our founders. And prayer has been part of the country's sort of way of going through hard times since the beginning of the nation, hasn't it?
Absolutely. So many of our founding fathers believed in the power of prayer. You especially look at George Washington. He was renowned for going off way, and his soldiers would find him on his knees, one of the most powerful people in America at that time. They would find him on his knees seeking God's favor, and God directly intervened so often throughout the Revolutionary War. And it was really fun when we were talking about Ronald Reagan earlier. I read a story about him, and the prime minister of, I believe it was India, was coming to visit. And he wrote in his journal that he really wanted to have an opportunity to influence him and keep him away from communism. But the weather was looking to be bad. And he wrote in his journal, I have been up all night praying that the weather would be okay. And for one extra day, the weather held off and he was able to meet with the minister of India. And I'm sure that impacted history because of his belief in prayer.
A praying president. Jeff, I think President Bush prayed a lot.
No, I think President Bush did pray a lot. Thinking about the caller asking about, praying and doing a great job praying for our president. I think of the story that came out with Pastor Saeed's wife. She said she was able to, finally Obama agreed to meet with her, and she was able to tell him, I've been praying for you. What a testimony for us. I mean, your husband is being held captive. The U.S. government, this president is not, from all appearances, not doing anything. He finally agrees after lots of pressure on him. He finally agrees, and she's able to say, I've been praying for you. What a testimony for us. And I agree. I mean, I think we do need to, we're commanded to pray for our authorities. We should be praying for the president.
Yeah, I mean, he's there. God put him there. And sometimes it's hard for me to believe God would put someone there, but I've seen in my lifetime so many times where things that seem hard are actually put there for our good. And so we have to trust that too. Let's take another call. Let's go to Tony in Georgia. Hey, Tony. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking my call, Hannah. Again, as an African American, he really surprises me with how, he gets, kind of into some of the local issues that have been going on, with the Trayvon Martin, with the St. Louis, and with the New York issue. But he wasn't really fair-minded about the outcomes of them, And then when the people, when they get them all ginned up and get them in an uproar, and with him not having to actually step out there and lay out the facts about what actually happened, especially when the recent Justice Department report came out clear in Wilson of him having to justifiably protecting himself against against Brown. This is all after the fact, and they knew it beforehand. And that's what bothers me the most about him.
Yeah, and just, I don't know if you heard the prayer breakfast speech, but it was, in a sense, he said that Christians were supportive of slavery and Jim Crow laws and using their Christianity sort of as an excuse for that, where, what about the part where Christians fought slavery? That was not mentioned at all.
Exactly. Well, I heard part of the speech also. And like I said, it's just that this president is just like you all had mentioned earlier about him having to be well measured with the way he say and do things. I've watched him this whole administration. And trust me, as an African American, he has been a serious shocker to me with how even. Oh, yes. If a Republican president, there is no way they would have been able to last this long with all the scandals and all the stuff. It just shocks me that people had marched on Washington.
Mike,
I'm just doing what Al Sharpton don't do, and that's his logo. Keep it real.
Keep it real. Thanks, Tony. Appreciate your call.
Yeah, I'll just commenting on what Tony said there. That I agree that they're definitely, and as I said earlier, President Obama is no fool. He knows what he's doing. But what's frustrating is that often he seems to have an established or set narrative already in place before the facts or evidence come out, and that really can apply to a lot of different incidents and situations that have come up over his presidency. And I think that's what's frustrating to people is his seemingly unwillingness to depart from his pre-established narrative that he's going to tell, because it pushes a particular agenda. And it's not because he's not a smart man. He's obviously a smart man, but it's just it doesn't sit well with the American people who feel like they're having the wool pulled over their eyes.
Yeah, so I wonder now, in the next couple of election cycles, which side of this is going to win out? The side that wants to protect freedom in this country and to be what we've been as a nation, or the side that now is it's a growing sector of the economy that's getting goodies and that's being that's being supported by certain government programs. We've talked about a lot of those this week. I sort of had as my theme in the other days that I hosted this week, the size and scope of government. And there's a commentary that if you're listening online, you'll hear in the next break about school dinners. And it's just one thing. Food stamps have skyrocketed. A lot of these programs of welfare have expanded tremendously. And so, when do we get to the point where we have that sector who's hooked, supporting these progressive ideas that this administration is foisting on us, with in comparison with people who think like most of our point of view listeners, who want to preserve freedom, who want to have the free enterprise system and for people to work to gain their station in life. Mike?
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be part of the next election, this theme that the larger our government gets and the more powerful they get, the less free we are as people who are subject to that or live in that government system. And whenever the government gets more powerful and we start to see freedoms erode, what's typically the first freedom that we see, or one of the very first freedoms that we see? And if you look throughout history and if you look across the world, it's usually religious freedom. And there's a reason for that, and that's because, as Kelly Shackelford often says, that a large, powerful government will not stand for somebody who says, I bow to a higher authority than you, government. I submit to a higher authority than the government itself. And so we see religious freedom as really being one of the first freedoms that's eroded, and that's exactly why the Founding Fathers put religious freedom in the very First Amendment. They put it right up at the very top in the Bill of Rights because they knew that is the freedom and foundation upon which all of our other freedoms flow. And so I think it really, if you think about it, a lot of the talking points and issues that come up in the election, they really have a direct link to religious freedom. If you want to sit down and think about it deeply at that level.
And I think when you do, Mike, I'm glad you brought it up, you realize that this is why they go after religious liberty. And this is why you have so many forces at all levels and in all areas. I mean, in our schools, in the churches, and in the public square, all areas, even in the military now, they're going after religious liberty. The left is, because they see that as our one hope, and it gets in the way of their agenda. We'll have more right after this. The Associated Press reported recently on what it calls a growing trend: kids eating dinner at school. According to the AP, the Los Angeles Unified School District is doubling the number of students served dinner, with an eye toward eventually offering it at every school. School board member Bennett Kaiser told the AP, when kids are hungry, they don't pay attention. He says this is something that should have started years ago. The LA School District is the nation's second largest and contains lots of low-income neighborhoods where breakfasts and lunches have long been served at school. The introduction of after-school snacks and dinners is part of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act, passed and signed into law in 2010. Now, schools in the district serve supper to 75,000 students, and there are plans to expand the program to about 150,000 over the next 2 years. This is a national program. In 2014, nearly 1 million students in 13 states and the District of Columbia were served dinner or an after-school snack as part of a pilot program under this bill. That came to 104 million suppers served, up from 19 million in 2009. Schools where at least half the students are low income and qualify for free or reduced price lunch are reimbursed for each supper by the U.S. Department of Agriculture at a rate often significantly higher than the cost of the meal. LA School District derives $16.6 million in revenue from the program, which officials say will go toward expanding it. Even better-off families are asking to participate in this program. They say it will free up time after school for sports, homework, and family activities. Speaking of family activities, how about dinner together? The benefits of regular family dinners are obvious and backed by tons of research. They include greater academic achievement, less substance abuse, less delinquency, better family relations. Of course, that's assuming there is a family and that a parent is going to provide a meal. But this whole school dinner idea, the thought that you're a parent and the school will provide all your kids' meals, only encourages that kind of negligence and irresponsibility. According to the Heritage Foundation, this is taking things entirely in the wrong direction. Policy analyst Rachel Sheffield points out that the federal government currently operates about a dozen programs that provide food assistance to poor and lower-income Americans. On top of that, she says, there are about 70 other means-tested government welfare programs that provide cash, housing, medical care, and social services. 1 in 7 Americans receives food stamps. 1 in 5 children lives in a family receiving them. If a family is hungry, these should help. Really, as a nation, we must think about whether a welfare program provides more harm than good. And as for better-off families who wouldn't mind government-provided dinners at school, some real reprioritizing is in order. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
We've had a good discussion on religious liberty today with all the folks from Liberty Institute, including Mike Berry and Jeff Mateer and Cassie Doolan. And it's sort of fortuitous that another person I really respect on this issue, Russell Moore, who is president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission in the Southern Baptist Convention. He newly took over that spot a little over a year ago from Dr. Richard Land, who many of you know. And I really like the way he thinks on a lot of these issues and on religious liberty. And he has a piece in the Wall Street Journal today. And it discusses the 2016 presidential election. And he's answering the question, what will matter to evangelicals in 2016. And he says, well, he kind of talks about Thomas Jefferson and how Thomas Jefferson may not be the poster child for evangelical Christianity, but because of what he did and what he wrote in protection of religious liberty as president, he was actually a very good president for religious liberty. And that is the kind of thing we need to do when we're looking for a president. We don't want to go and find the person who's spewing the right slogans, who's using us, we Christians, as an interest group. This person has to understand what religious liberty really is. And so Russell Moore says in this piece, he says, I'm quoting him, Jefferson won over the Baptists and evangelicals without pretending to be one of them. And then he later says the founding era evangelicals, such as fiery Virginia Baptist revivalist John Leland, didn't care about motives, but about who would work to secure freedom. That's a good model for the next election. In recent years, candidates have assumed that they can win over evangelicals by learning Christian slogans, by masking political rallies as prayer meetings, and by basically producing a long-form new birth certificate to prove they've been born again. And then he later says, in the past several elections, religious liberty has hardly been mentioned. But now he says candidates didn't have to answer how they would protect the legacy of religious freedom fought so hard for by Jefferson and his Baptist allies. But he goes on to say that a few years ago, a decision about whether the government could force employers to pay for abortion-causing drugs would rest on one swing vote on the court. Of course, that was the Hobby Lobby case. He also mentions the one that Jeff mentioned earlier, the Hosanna-Tabor decision, which was a unanimous decision protecting religious liberty, even though it was against a White House arguing the point that no previous administration would ever have pursued, and that was that government should have sway over hiring decisions in churches. And he just goes on to say religious liberty is too important to see it become one more culture war wedge issue. We want candidates who know why our religious freedom matters. And I recommend going to the Wall Street Journal. I didn't get to post this today, but to read this, perhaps tomorrow you can Google this if you don't get the journal. Because I think as we move forward, Jeff, toward the 2016 elections, there are many people out there who are attractive to many evangelicals. And think about why you support someone, and will they truly get religious liberty? It's the most important issue. It's really the most important issue in the election.
It's ultimately the freedom issue. And as Mike said, and Kelly says so often, I mean, it is our first freedom. It is the foundational freedom. If you take away religious liberty, you will take away all liberties. And Penna, you're right. Russell Moore is right. People have learned the lingo. And so it's not just enough to say I'm born again. It's not just enough to say I'm a Christian. It's not just enough to say I'm for religious liberty. It's actually we need to go behind those, go behind the slogans, and actually look into what has this person done? Where have they been? What is their worldview? How are they going to make decisions? What is their character? I mean, I think all that adds up into, and you know, we just haven't done a very good job of doing those things, and we let people say what they say, and we're not looking at so much their actions. And I think that's what I encourage, because you know, this next president is going to probably appoint Supreme Court justices, and you mentioned, and Russell in his article mentions the Hobby Lobby decision, 5-4.
Yeah.
The Galloway versus Town of Greece case, which dealt with, you know, can we pray before council meetings? I mean, something we've been doing in this country for 235 years. Who would have thought we'd even have a case about it? But we had a case about it, and it was a 5-4 decision. And so the next president is going to appoint people to the U.S. Supreme Court. He's going to appoint people to the courts of appeal and the federal district court benches. Literally hundreds of men and women there'll be openings, and there'll be appointments to these very powerful positions. What type of person is the next president going to appoint? What type of worldview is that future judge going to have? Vitally important issues.
Folks, when you think about ministries to support and periodicals to read and how to talk to your friends. I think this is it. You've got to go to the root of it and help people understand the issues that are at stake. And it's not just what can I get from you. It's really the future of the country, isn't it, Michael?
That's right. Going back to Jeff's point about the next president is likely to appoint at least one Supreme Court justice, and who knows how many lower federal court judges. There was an empirical study done recently that talked about on the issue of religious freedom cases, Establishment Clause, free exercise cases, the single most determinative factor in deciding how that case was going to come out was who appointed that judge, whether it was a Republican president or a Democrat president. And so I think, you can look at that and that study and say, this next president, I mean, sure, they may only be in office for 4 years or 8 years, but those judges can serve for life. Mm-hmm. And so that is dozens, if not hundreds of decisions and case law that's going to be, the future legal precedent and framework going forward in our nation. So do we want the legal framework for the First Amendment to be somebody who doesn't value religious freedom, or for that person who's deciding that case to have been appointed by somebody who doesn't value religious freedom? So don't just, I encourage listeners and voters to not only think in terms of 4-year blocks of time, but to really think, the long game. And
Cassie, as we look at this, Liberty Institute is certainly there to win cases, but they brought you in to help communicate and help teach people. Mm-hmm. And in a sense, I think that's going to be very important in the next couple of years before the presidential election, to help people understand what's at stake. So I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining me today. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. And Doug, I want to thank you for sitting in today and doing such a great job and getting all those wonderful bites out of the president's speech. We really appreciate it. Catherine, thank you so much for making everything happen. And also, Chris, thank you. And I just, again, want to point you to our website. It's a great tool for you. You can see the bios of our two co-hosts today, Mike and Jeff, and their pictures. And you can click in and go through to Liberty Institute. You can find the Reagan article, which I think you should take the time today to read on in celebration of Reagan Day. And then certainly our donate button is there. We are a listener-supported ministry, and also our take action item on the issue of border security. If you haven't done that, go there and weigh in on that issue. We make it very easy. But mainly, we hope and pray, actually, that you have a wonderful weekend. And, with all the issues swirling around and the things there to disturb us this weekend, won't you just remember that we have once had a president who actually led our country in good directions, and we do have a God who is really in control. So join me this weekend in praying to him for a better future and also in praising him. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
Leadership in the House of Representatives calls it a border security bill. Kenneth Palinkas, who represents Immigration Service personnel, calls it a global joke, writing that it, quote, does nothing to preclude anyone in the world from turning themselves in at the U.S. border and obtaining automatic entry and federal benefits. In other words, he's saying it's a welcome mat and free stuff. Does that sound like border security to you? Point of View developed its Take Action system for issues like this to help make your voice heard by your elected officials. Visit pointofview.net right now and click on the gray Take Action button near the top of the screen. That's the gray Take Action button. We've also got it linked in the middle of the front page under the pictures of today's guests. Kirby Anderson says border security is a serious issue that deserves real solutions. Take action now at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net. Thank you for taking action to speak up in defense of the nation. Pointofview.net. Take action. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.